Hello and welcome to this episode of Crate Conversations. I'm excited to be here today with Brittany McLaughlin. She is the Jellyfish Education Coordinator for Save Barnegat Bay, and I had the opportunity to meet Brittany at our Green Fair this year, and I had a great conversation with her, and I thought that she had some really great and good information that we could share with people who live here in Brick. So I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So how does one become a Jellyfish Education Coordinator?
Actually, so my job title is kind of fun and cool sounding, but we actually got one of our partners got a grant from the DEP to try to reduce bay nettle populations. Bay nettles are a type of jellyfish in Barnegat Bay and lagoon communities specifically. So my job is to coordinate that grant, working with our partners from the Berkeley Township Underwater Search and Rescue Dive Team, very lengthy name. Dr. Paul Bologna from Montclair State University, who is kind of the jellyfish scientist in New Jersey, some students from MATES, and basically it. Save Barnegat Bay.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I work with mostly community members in lagoon communities, talked with them about jellyfish, about our project, and trying to get people more aware of the jellyfish problem in Barnegat Bay and how it connects to the health of Barnegat Bay.
Okay, so the only thing I know about jellyfish is they sting you, but we've had a chance to talk a little bit, and you said there are several different kinds of jellyfish that we have in Barnegat Bay?
For the most part, yeah. So we have the bay nettle jellyfish is the jellyfish of focus for this project specifically.
Okay.
It is the white jellyfish that you see most commonly. It has a white bell, white stinging cells and tentacles, very easy to identify. They are very closely related to the sea nettle jellyfish who lives on the Atlantic Ocean right off our coast. But they are genetically different. So they look pretty much the same as the Atlantic sea nettle, so it's kind of hard to distinguish. But we know by the bell size, it's a little bit smaller than those jellyfish. And also, the sting is pretty mild. That jellyfish is the most predominant. We also have, in the northern section of Barnegat Bay mostly, we have the clinging jellyfish, which is an invasive species that usually can see them. They're very, very small. They're about a quarter size. They are invasive and they have a pretty powerful sting. The sting initially isn't too bad, but they can be dangerous and they can lead to hospitalization. Our scientist, Dr. Paul Bologna, is studying them. You usually see them in the colder months when people aren't usually using Barnegat Bay and swimming in it, but they are clinging jellyfish because they tend to cling to eelgrass and things that are floating in Barnegat Bay.
Okay. So your project, when we were talking during the Green Fair, you were talking about people who have docks and things that they can do to help, I guess, lower the population of these jellyfish. So what are some of the things that you're doing with homeowners that live on the bay?
So we have 3 targeted lagoon communities: Berkeley Shores, Green Island and Toms River, and a section of Shore Acres in Brick. We are working with the dive team to try to scrape off jellyfish polyps off of those docks and bulkheads in those communities. The interesting thing about jellyfish is they have a very interesting life cycle in general, but they go through 2 different phases of reproduction. So you have the adult jellyfish that you see, you can identify, it's very easy to know that it's a jellyfish. They're swimming around in the water, floating around in the water. They release eggs, fertilized eggs, then become a little larvae looking, kind of looks like a fuzzy tic-tac is how I describe it. They have to find a hard surface to attach to in the open ocean and in other parts of the world. It's very hard to find out where these larvae are going to attach, usually on rocks, shells, the like. But in lagoon communities, we are aligned with bulkheading, we're aligned with docks, so they have a huge area that we can actually identify, cling to, and form a polyp. That polyp then kind of looks like a little vase almost. It has little small tentacles, it attaches to the bulkhead, and then it'll start its second form of reproduction, which it'll clone itself, so make copies. So either one polyp can become 2, or and so on. Or they can start to go through strobulation is the technical term, but it kind of looks like pancake-like stacks of little baby jellyfish is how I refer to them as. And those stacks, you can have like 10 stacks of these baby jellyfish in the sitting. So once the water is warm enough and the baby jellyfish are ready, they will then branch off and eventually mature into the adult jellyfish that you can identify and start the cycle all over again. So they can produce very rapidly over a pretty short period of time, and those polyps can remain on bulkheads or docks or any hard surface really for many seasons.
Okay, so what is the aside from having getting stung or whatever, what's the problem with having this many jellyfish reproducing in our bay area?
Yeah, so what we are doing or learning is that these jellyfish are not very picky, and they could survive in poor water quality conditions, while other native creatures that have survived in Barnegat Bay and thrived in Barnegat Bay in the past and still kind of continue to do so start to struggle a little bit. So bay nettles especially, they do not need a huge amount of oxygen in the water. They can have a lot of nutrient pollution. They can survive in poor water quality standards, and they also aren't picky with their diet. So they eat usually larvae of any of our native plants or animals, I should say. And they can just eat whatever, wherever.
So they're really taking up the space and food that our native creatures would use.
Yes, so they're taking up the space to live on our docks and bulkheads when barnacles and other settling organisms, because we do have many settling organisms, where they maybe can't anymore because the water quality is not optimal for their survival. So they're outcompeting them that way, and then they're also have the chance, especially in the adult form, to eat any other larval animals in that stage.
So what are we doing, or what can people that live in that area in our community do to help kind of stave or push off that population?
Yeah, so what we are doing, or trying to prove, is if we can disrupt the jellyfish life cycle at the polyp stage before those baby jellies can branch off and become adult jellyfish again. Since they're producing so rapidly as a polyp, we're trying to brush or scrape off that polyp off of bulkheads and floating docks to see if that has a meaningful impact on the bay and adult jellyfish population in the next coming season. So we work with the Berkeley dive team to brush. Basically, we use pool brushes and go along vinyl, even sometimes wood, bulkheads underneath floating docks and try to scrape them off, just give them a quick brush through. Polyps don't really, once they're dislodged, unless they can find another hard surface, usually in a strong current, we can't seem, it's very hard to prove that they can reattach and then continue with that
so maybe
stage.
they just float off and just die.
So especially in lagoons, especially in lagoon communities, there's not really a strong current. The bottom of the lagoon is pretty murky, so it's not really a hard surface once it's scraped off to be able to bounce back and cling onto again. So we're just trying to see if this system could be a viable system to prove that this could help impact bay nettle populations, kind of stem them off.
And does a dive team have to do it, or can like a homeowner just at least at the surface level where they can reach start to help with that?
The dive team try to figure out how this could work and how anyone could do it, or if their organization or someone else could have a paid service to do this. But we've been letting homeowners know who are outside of our targeted communities that they can just bring a pool brush, just gently scrape. We don't want to scrape everything off of our bulkheads and floating docks, because some of them are very beneficial and help improve water quality, like barnacles and such. So if you're using a pool brush, you're probably not going to scrape off a barnacle. Just gently take a pool brush, scrape as far as you can go. You don't necessarily need to get in the water. If you feel comfortable doing that, that's also great. But just once a year usually, or maybe even twice a year in the off season, fall, spring, just do a quick brush through on your bulkhead or underneath your floating dock especially, or you can even take out your floating dock temporarily for the winter to have anything die off and then put it back in. That should, if this project goes well, that should prove that we can limit jellyfish populations.
So you have an event coming up. What event do you have coming up?
So we actually just sent out a mailer back in the beginning of the summer to a portion of Shore Acres, usually the S, if you can look at the map, the S curve of Shore Acres. We are heading there in the fall to try to, for free, scrape off bulkheads, scrape bulkheads and floating docks with the dive team. Probably got the mailer, but if you did not, you can always just contact us. But we are trying to get people, as many people as you can, signed up. Right now we have about 17 homeowners in the area. And we are also going to have a lagoon lab, which is more of a community science portion, which anyone living on the water can get involved in. We have little tiny plastic plates that you can put onto your dock and acts as a temporary habitat for settling organisms. Then after a month or two, you bring them back in for the Lagoon Lab, which will be happening at Shore Acres Club, and get them inspected by our scientists,
see what's
by
coming
students,
in, right?
see what's coming in. It's a way to try to track jellyfish polyps,
Okay.
if we can see any jellyfish polyps on these plates. It's super cool, and you just get to learn more about the things that are growing and thriving in your
Right in the
lagoon.
water that you're in every day,
Right, yeah.
probably, right? Either
Exactly.
boating or fishing. Excellent.
So exactly, if they're growing on the settling plates, they're most likely growing on your bulkhead.
Excellent.
So it's super fun, it's super cool. You get to see a lot of really cool different critters. You get to learn all about them and their importance or importance to the community that you're living in. Which is super
Fantastic.
fun. Yeah.
Well, this is really cool. So I would encourage anyone that lives in that area of Shore Acres, if you've received the invitation, to please respond. We're going to have that information up on the screen as well for anyone that's interested. This was really interesting. I learned a lot, and I'm very excited for you to come into our community and help everyone out. So thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you out for the event. Have a great day.
Thank you.